Hello and welcome, everybody. I'm Dottie Berry with tinyevolution.com, and I'm coming to you from the Pacific Northwest here in Blaine, Washington. That's about 5 minutes from the Canadian border, 45 minutes south of Vancouver, BC in Canada, and 2 hours north of Seattle. And I'm really privileged today to be talking with somebody who I believe is going to, if not already, is an icon in this what's going on with tiny homes. You know, what Tiny Homes Revolution does is it brings to the forefront innovative ideas that are going on in the tiny home micro housing field, because I think it's really important to think about living tiny. In other words, leaving a smaller footprint, but still dreaming big. I don't think those things are exclusive. In fact, I think if we can embrace this concept and bring it into reality, we can make dreams come true again in this country and throughout the world. So I feel really privileged today to have Mr. Michael Whitby, and he is the executive director of the Micro Communities Concept. Is that correct, Michael? Did I say that right?
Micro Community Concepts, that's right, Dottie.
Okay, so anyway, Michael, let's kind of dive right in, because I know there is so much interest in micro housing, tiny homes, and there's different definitions, and there's a whole history about how you got from point A to point B to point C and then to Z. It's a process, as we all know, and it's certainly changing in the United States and throughout the world, as we have come into a time where, you know, we're just finding people homeless. We're finding people who are no longer afford the dream of home ownership, and all of that, it needs to shift. So, Michael, let's just start out here. Break it down for us. Give us a little bit of history, not only with what we're talking about in tiny homes, micro housing, and also your personal story is, how did you get involved?
Well, first I would like to discern the difference between a tiny house, micro home community, and an accessory dwelling unit. These are all three tiny houses. Yes. But tiny houses in the tiny house movement means that it's on an axle and on wheels and that it's movable. The reason that folks for years have had to build tiny houses on wheels is the local ordinances banning accessory dwelling units and RVs parked in people's parking lots and things like that. We have a mentality that bigger is better in America, and obviously that has its implications and not always good. So the difference between these three things that I'm trying to describe, first, a tiny house is just what I said. In the tiny house movement, it's an RV, it's a house, stick-built house on wheels, you know, that has its positive implications and negative implications. The positive implication is that you can move it around and you can be versatile and you can be mobile. Of course, it didn't start out that way with tiny houses. It started out is that the city won't let us build a small house on my mom's property, so I can't live here, so I'll have to put it on wheels. So the tiny house movement was born of necessity.
Yes.
Of course, the necessity of downsizing, not being able to afford this humongous mortgage bill every month and all the associated costs. So we have tiny homes. We have accessory dwelling units that are built in people's yards. So if you're a property owner, and say, for instance, you want to move your grandmother in, but she doesn't want to live in your house, then you'll build her a little cottage in your backyard. That used to be what everybody did. If they had a family member or they had a loved one or a friend that needed a place to stay, they would just go build them a little house in their backyard. And that's so accessory dwelling units. And now we have micro communities, which are tiny houses, just like accessory dwelling units and just like tiny houses without the axles and wheels being built into whole communities of tiny houses. So it's basically, micro community is basically a whole neighborhood with all the infrastructure in a much smaller space.
Hey, Michael, let's clarify for people where you're located and where you're putting this in.
Well, you know, this comes from Portland, Oregon, so we have to, part of it comes from Portland, Oregon. The part that is sustainable and self-replicating comes from Portland, Oregon. And so we're trying to find land. It's kind of strange how the city and the county and the state and the feds own a lot of the land, and it's really hard for us to find a lot of land where we can put a lot of houses that aren't zoned in particular ways, whether it's commercial, residential 1, residential 5, or 15. So it's really hard to find zoning. But to answer your question, we have today actually finally picked a location to put the first micro community in Portland without government involvement, because that's another issue that we'll talk about in a minute, where governments want to be involved to deal with the homeless issue. Mm-hmm. But what I call just normal everyday people would like to live in a much simpler way, a much less expensive way. So we have the address that we looked at today is 15023 Southeast Stark Street. It is 8/10 of an acre, and it has a house already on it. It has a kind of a large sort of community building. I'm not sure if it was a barn or what it was, but it's more of a modern building. It has a one-car garage. It has parking up and down the street, so people that live there can park. It's got the zoning. It's got the bus route right a block away. It's got all of these different things that we look at before we select a site. And there are a lot of things we look at before we select a site. Transportation is one of them. It's like the main thing. If we're going to have a lot of seniors and we're going to have a lot of low-income folks, then we're going to need to have public transportation. If that's not the most important thing, it's one of the most important things. So at 15023 Stark, Southeast Stark, we found that. And we found it sort of happenstancely, sort of not. We went through real estate agents and we had them do some work for us. But this particular piece of property has old growth trees, there's apple trees, cherry trees. It's got already grapevines. It has one of the defining factors that we would acquaint with a micro community, which is food. We need to be able to produce food as part of our community. So that particular property is very important, and we're excited about that piece of property. Now,
Michael, this property now that you have found, and you had all these different parameters around what you were looking for, and you finally found that. I'm sure price is a consideration, or was this property to be able to be donated? I mean, what are you really looking for in that way when you go after a property? And what community are you targeting? I heard you talk about homeless, and I think I've seen on your site about people who make less than $20,000. I mean, I think people are coming in that homeless today is really embracing a different community too, because we have many people, because of loss of jobs and all, that are homeless now. So how are you pulling all that together?
Well, I think you asked about 8 different questions. I'm not sure where to start with that, honestly, because that's pretty much the crux of the problem and what we've been trying to solve over the last several years in Portland. Basically, what I would say is that homelessness is not what it used to be. Yeah. When I grew up, homelessness was usually a guy that just didn't take care of himself and that had given up, had lost hope. maybe lost family members and had traumatic things, and it was just over for him, and so he would take a shopping cart and he would go down the street. But it's not like that anymore. Since the housing bubble burst and all the predatory lending and all, and the banks and all the different economic issues that we have to deal with, not just as Americans, but people from around the world, we have to deal with these huge issues. And so this, to answer your question in a nutshell, pretty much comes from the need to be less reliant on a boss, less reliant on a paycheck, less reliant on a bank loan, less reliant on a grocery store, less reliant altogether. Mm-hmm. I think that it's a lot less about the footprint that we leave behind than it is the necessity of doing with less. Mm-hmm. And doing with less is just one of the positive parts. Doing with less means, less 2x4s to build a house I live in, mm-hmm. Less gas to heat it, those types of things. So as we go on into the future, we're going to need to know, how are we going to solve this issue when we have cities like Portland, Oregon, that's a small city, all of a sudden finding itself in a position where it doesn't have land, where we have to build up, and we have to build concrete, and we have to build, we need to build boxes for people to live in. We lose our sense of community in those places. And so the spectrum is wide of why we're doing this. And it doesn't necessarily have to be about economics. It doesn't necessarily have to be about the carbon footprint that we're leaving. And it doesn't necessarily have to be a moral choice. It's a very complicated issue. It's almost as complicated as homelessness itself. So I think I maybe didn't answer any of your questions on that.
Well, I think, some of the answers, like you say, are, very complex. They're not just these simplistic things that you can say. But what do you think, outside of some of the things that you've mentioned and some of the obstacles and all, what made you pick whoever you all have picked to do the housing part? When you get down to it and you get your land, you get all these other things in place, you say, we want to do this. What next? Where are you all headed with that?
Well, first of all, we have a team of folks. We have hundreds of people that are involved in the micro-community concepts. It's certainly not my thing. And even though maybe I've been the guy that has chosen to go out in front on it, it's certainly not my idea. Like I said, we have hundreds of people like yourself that support this idea. And so through these months that we've been working on this particular issue of microhousing in communities, we have found that people have stood up from around the world. We get people from Denmark and Canada and, of course, all over Europe and all over America, all 50 states that said, yeah, well, this is something that we need to do. So to answer your question about that is, if we need help with design or architecture, or how to deal with the web and maybe put a video together, or how do we put the construction costs together, how do we do this, how do we do that? Well, we reach out to the people that are probably watching this now, people that have talent, the people have experience, they know how to build, and they want to be involved. So that's the foundation that Micro-Community Concepts is built on. It's built on the foundation of everybody being involved, and pretty much everybody agreeing on the fact that we do have these issues. We're going to have to figure out how to do this without infringing on other people's rights to live in a big house, without casting these dark shadows over people that are using too much energy and uh, just right. And we also have to be careful about who we blame to how we got to this point. I think it's important not to point fingers. I think it's more important that we explain our ideas, how we can get out of this mess, because this is a mess.
That's a great way to look at it, Michael, because I think sometimes people misunderstand what is being done, that this is an additional option. I mean, like if you have the funds and you have the wherewithal, America is about choice, okay? And I never want to see that go away. So if somebody chooses because they can afford it to have something bigger, more power to them.
Yeah.
What I think we're trying to do is give options for those people who have run out of options and hope, to restore hope so that they can participate in that dream of home ownership. I know I've been up in Canada meeting with a couple of developers that are doing some amazing work with the homes that they are creating. One gentleman, John Murchie, he's actually got a patent, the only patented panel now that creates this. I was up there last week with him, and we'll be going back up.
Well, I want to talk to him.
Oh yeah, listen, this is really cool. In fact, it took him 4 years to get his patent, and now he's got a second patent on the process. So I was up there with him last week while they're moving their factory into a new location. I'm going to be going back up there because this is absolutely amazing what they're putting together. And the idea, just to share with you, he actually knows what he can do to build factories, okay? So my idea kind of is to have a factory where, what would it be like if homeless were employed building their own homes and homes for others, and we were all working together to create this, So, I mean, we could go off on a lot of things. I'll share.
Well, no, Dottie, I'm glad you brought that up, and I want to interrupt for a second if I can.
Yeah.
Part of our plan to make this happen is financing.
Mm-hmm.
One of the big issues that we came up with is, how are we going to finance this? It's not a lot of money.
Yeah.
It's like $1 million for 50 people for the rest of their life. It's not a lot of money. But how do we come up with this money? So we decided that we were going to start a B corporation, which is a mutual benefit corporation. I'm not sure if you know what that is. It's kind of new in America.
Oh, I really don't. I'd love to hear about it.
It's a cross between a nonprofit and a for-profit corporation.
Okay.
And so when you start a B corporation, which is new this year, what you do is you commit your corporation to benefiting society. So what we've decided to do to finance micro communities in Portland is to go ahead and start a B corporation that will be in business with homeowners, especially, to build accessory dwelling units in their yards, so that they can have rentals in their yards. Whether they want to rent them or not is up to them. So we believe that smaller houses are very important, but not just on wheels and not just in micro communities, but also in people's yards. Cottage homes used to be very important in America because we have family and we need a place for family to stay. We have visitors, we have people that work for us, and so we need places for people to stay. So we believe firmly at Micro Community Concepts that we need to fight the powers that be, whoever they are, and allow homeowners the right to build tiny houses in their backyards. Accessory.
Oh, Michael, I absolutely love it.
We'll take that income. We will put those folks to work. Building modular accessory dwelling units with a bunch of different styles in northeast or southeast, maybe even northwest Portland, in factory type setting. We'll take some of these folks that are having a hard time looking for work. We'll teach them how to construct these, and then we'll take them out to the to construction sites, and we'll teach them how to excavate. We'll We'll go ahead and teach a lot of people how to build. We'll bring employment to the folks that really desperately need it. We'll bring housing to the people that need it. And we'll bring an income to the homeowners. A lot of homeowners are experiencing hardships that they might not be able to get out of, including gentrification, unless we have things like accessory dwelling units that can bring an income to them. They might not be able to go out and work and create an income for themselves, but that property that they've been working on for all those years, that they've been paying for all those years, can generate an income. We want to make sure that the land that we have in Portland is utilized. And
Absolutely.
one of the last things that we're going to take is the government telling us that as a private property owner, we can't build accessory dwelling units in our yards. We're just not going to put up with that. And fortunately for us, the city of Portland is extremely supportive in this endeavor. On their own, they went and changed a bunch of the accessory dwelling unit rules and regulations, zoning, on their own. They've reached out to people in the tiny house community and set up meetings and changed all sorts of codes and ordinance and zoning on their own. So it's really nice to live in a city where the government is actually taking a proactive role, with our lead, of course, but taking a proactive role that could lead governments in, they say, Seattle or Blaine to do the same thing. And now all of a sudden, we have homeowners that were in peril that are no longer in peril. We have people that were possibly homeless or on the verge of homelessness that are no longer in that position, living much better lives. We have people that were unemployed that are now learning a trade, not a career. They're learning how to build. So it's basically back to the basics, right back to where we were as a humanity hundreds of years ago, when that's what we would do. We would provide for the people in our neighborhood. We'd provide for our family. We would go out there. We would work with the townspeople to build a house, and we would expect the same from them. I think it's sort of reinventing the wheel. It's sort of.
Well, what about putting a new set of wheels on? You know, we have some things that I think can be done, and you know, one of my ideas, Michael, is that we have so many vets that are homeless. And I read a recent article that as far as teenagers who are homeless, 40% of the teenagers are LGBT. And for people who may not know what that is, that's lesbian, gay, bisexual, and transgender youth. And they only represent about 5% of the population. And what's happening is they're coming from families. I understand this type of thinking because they're very conservative families, and they're being booted out. And so these kids are on the street. So I have this vision of vets and the LGBT community side by side in these factories, because we can actually, talking with John, we can set up a factory for around 100,000, and we can actually be, when we ramp that up, with these panels, can be producing about 20 homes a day for the basic part, you know, and within a week have homes ready. So there is something going on where everybody's saying, what can we do? How can we do it? You've shared with us some of the obstacles coming about, but you have shared how those are being overcome, where the government is really working hand in hand to change those. What kind of tips do you have for a person like myself in this community of basically Bellingham, Washington, Blaine, Washington? How should we approach about getting those zoning laws changed? Because I had somebody share with me that, you know, they thought it was going to impact their building business. And to me, that's just the kind of thinking that says we can't all coexist. I think we can. Again, you can have your big home if that's what you want and can afford it, but why are those people threatened by the small homes, and why are the people who want small homes threatened by the other? That doesn't serve anybody, I don't believe.
Well, you might have hit it right on the head. I mean, there are the haves and the have-nots, and that's not that I'm not saying that that is the end all. What I'm trying to say is that all right. Let me give for instance. I live in Southwest Portland. It's in the Southwest Hills. It's Crescent Ridge. It's an area with big yards, but they're also big homes.
Uh-huh.
And they're doctors, they're lawyers, uh, they're not in need of living in a small space,
Uh-huh.
and they don't really understand why anyone would need to live in a small space. Unfortunately, I think people are just out of touch with
Uh-huh.
reality. And so I think by doing things like you're doing, by spreading the word that, hey, there are a lot of normal, everyday people, people that have worked all their lives, and
Yes.
now they're stuck in this position where they could actually be sleeping in their car. We have a board member that is, and I'm not going to mention her name. I don't think she would mind, but I'm not going to do it. But she's a potential board member for Micro Community Concepts. She is a professor at a college here in Portland. She has a master's in landscaping. She has a master's in plant biology, and she's going to end up homeless. She's going to end up homeless because she's retired age. She's not really hireable. I don't understand that, but this is what she tells me.
Yeah.
She is going to end up homeless. She's worked all her life. She has all these good things. She has this family. How did she end up in a position where she could end up homeless? Well, the fact of the matter is that she's been pushed out. She's been downsized without her even knowing it. She didn't have a choice.
Yeah.
So so this is really what's upsetting to me is if my mother was to be in a position where it's like, oh, really? That loan was adjustable, and now you've been living in that home for 35 years, and now they're going to take it, and there's nothing you can do. There's a lot of folks that are in that same position right
Absolutely.
now.
Yeah.
So,
I think, that if we just look around in our country and around the world, I keep saying we're better than this.
uh,
We are better than this. And we are smart people. And when smart people decide that they want something to happen, I have this favorite saying that I am only one, but still I am one. I cannot do everything, but I can do something. And I will
right.
not refuse to do the something I can do. Of course, most people think that Helen Keller first said that. She wasn't really the first person, but she made it popular and made it known. But that is the truth. Even though we're one, we have to bind together as a group to make a difference. But when enough good people stand up and say no more, then those laws, those zoning laws, will have to change. There was a reason at some point for them. But guess what? There's a new reason for changing those zoning laws. What approach did you all take to let people know, look, you don't have to be afraid of what we're doing. Let's lock arms and let's move forward to help one another and solve some issues, to have solutions versus just complaining. Complaining gets us nowhere.
Thank you, Dottie. Thank you for bringing me back to that.
Yeah.
That was the answer I was supposed to give. Chronologically, how did this happen?
Yeah.
Well, we know that the government doesn't listen unless people are talking. People that make a difference are talking. Here in Portland, we have 96 neighborhood associations. It's a very small city, and they're all divided up into neighborhood associations.
Uh-huh.
Neighborhood associations vote. They get together, they have committees, they vote. They listen to neighborhood associations. So what we did first off was go to neighborhood associations and said, hey, you have a homeless problem.
Uh-huh.
You have a problem with your parents, your children, your people from your neighborhood losing their homes. Would you like to keep them in your neighborhood? Because we think we might have an answer to keep them in your own neighborhood, so they don't need to go downtown to the shelter. Perhaps the people from here that became homeless should stay here. And so we went to the neighborhood associations, then we went to organizations like different nonprofits. We presented to them with renderings and our ideas. We go to the Human Rights Commission. We would go to different organizations that care about the issues that we're talking about, that know, and that may not have teeth, but they have a voice. So the more voices, the more attention you're going to get. The more people that are talking about it, the more attention you're going to get. So after we went to the neighborhood associations, we went to all the different organizations, we were invited by the mayor to present to City Council in Portland our idea of a micro community and what that would be.
How long ago was that? So we can kind of get a timeline of what people have to think about.
That was in June of this year.
June of this year.
Yeah.
Okay.
We started Micro Community Concepts on May 1st, the nonprofit. We started on May 1st of this year. I don't think it was actually filed with the state until the 7th, but we're pretty new.
So that wasn't the B Corp. That was a regular nonprofit when you first filed it, or
We
not?
still haven't even filed the B Corp yet.
Okay, that's a coming thing. Okay, just trying to let people understand some of the steps that you're taking and how it sort of falls in line from the beginning to where you're at now.
Right. I would go to your local, the people that are local and that have a voice. They might be the churches that deal with the homeless issue. They might be the schools that see kids becoming homeless. They might be, you know, I'm sure you can imagine. So you build a coalition of people that care and that are willing to put the hours in and that are willing to put their talents and their finances into this. And then you spread the word. As you spread the word about this potential answer, some media people will get into it and they'll start dissecting it, and then it'll be in the media. And then once it's in the public, it's in your neighborhood, it's in the media, then the politicians are going to have no choice but to go ahead and grasp this and either take it and swallow it or spit it out. And so this particular thing, we found that every politician that we've ever spoken to, every organization we've ever spoken to, has decided to take the pill. That this is not something that we necessarily want to happen, but this is something that needs to happen. And what they found, the politicians, what they found, and not just the city, but the county, the state, and now HUD, what they found is that this is a good thing, and this is something to get behind, because this is something that voters want.
Right.
So in a step 1, step 2, step 3 scenario, again, I would go out and reach out to the civic organizations, the people that are the feet on the ground in your neighborhood, the people that know the homeless people, that know the people that are about to lose their home. They know them, and they're willing to fight passionately for them. And they take that to the, like I said, Human Rights Commission, the press, the churches, whoever, and then you build that coalition. Once that coalition has been built, you'll all have a pretty good idea of where you want this to happen and how you want it to happen.
Right.
And then you'll take it to the city or the county. And the city or the county will either pick it up or they won't. If they don't, that's probably not going to look at them. Look good for them. So chances are they're gonna pick up on it. Bellingham, Washington, from what I understand, is not a poor town. It's not a poor city. In fact, like Whibley Island or Bellingham, it's for the more successful people. Microsoft executives. I mean, that's one thing that comes to my mind when I think of Bellingham is Microsoft. Am I correct?
in Seattle, which is an hour and a half south, but some people do live there. I think what we've got is a town that's been fairly successful. However, a lot of those successful people have gone through a lot of different things over the past 6 years. I know that as a real estate investor, I pretty much lost all that, with some things that happened because people couldn't pay their rent, and I was way too nice, let people stay. I mean, you just go through, we're just going through, all of us, what we have to go through. I can tell you this recently, Michael. I've had a fascination with small homes since I had an interior design business in Lexington, Kentucky years ago, and I saw some builders doing some really unique things, and I just got fascinated with it. And so that sort of got sparked recently because I had a Pinterest board, with tiny, and I was just interested, okay, and passionate about it. That led me to start a Facebook group, and about the same time, without me knowing it, Clayton Petrie, he started Bellingham Tiny, and he and Suzanne decided to get a meeting together about the same time I was so we just had this meeting recently in Bellingham, and it was like standing room only, and we're all just going, where do we go from here? And I said, well, I'm going to interview this guy. I'm trying to get him to do this Hangout interview so we can learn from what you all are doing, because the more information we have, and just what you said right now is gold nuggets. That's what we're looking for, gold nuggets. What's our kind of first step? Because you all have gone through some of those things, and you have some wisdom that we don't have right now.
Well, you're about to have it. You're about to get it, and I'm telling you, it's very enlightening when you are around folks like Dee Williams from Pad Tiny Houses, or Eli Spivak from Greenspot, or all these other folks that have been working on these tiny house communities for decades.
Yeah.
They've been trying for a long time to get this rolling along, and so it is exciting. One thing that I'm passionate about is that we have to take control of our politicians. We cannot allow them to let the Business Alliance or the different powers that be dictate us how we're going to live our lives, especially on our own private property. And if they tell us that we can't have an accessory dwelling unit or 5 accessory dwelling units in our own yard, when a block away they can give a permit for a multifamily high density to a developer, and all the riches, if that's what you want to call it, if all the riches have to go to the developers, and the politicians are only agreeing with them because 5,000 here, 5,000 there, really pays off in elections.
Yeah.
We are going to have to fight the politicians. And I'm going to be honest. I would not have gotten this far with the tiny house movement or the micro community movement or any of the other things I'm involved in if I hadn't fought the politicians and fought them to the point where there's police and there's me and there's you. Literally, there's us, there's the police, and there's City Hall. Someone's going to have to give. We need an affordable place to live. Our friends, our family should be able to live in a house in my yard if I say so. I understand that there's building codes, we have sewer systems, and I understand that.
Yeah.
Health, I got that. But do not dictate to me as a private property owner how I'm going to utilize my land. That's a big issue. And until we stand up to the city council, the county, the state, the feds, all of them, they're going to continue to toe the line for big business and big money. And let's be honest, the people living in the big houses that don't want tiny houses next to them are running the big businesses. So big business, big money, it changes our lives. That's what put us in the position where we need a tiny house in the beginning. So we need to make sure that the politicians know not going to happen.
Yeah, it comes down, Michael, to owning the land that you have. Do you really own it? What does that mean? And
Well,
yeah.
yeah. Well, Dottie, as far as tiny homes on wheels or developing a tiny house community, I think that you and 10, 15, maybe 20 or 30, whatever, of your friends could easily put the money together to go buy a piece of land. And you could easily do that. You could easily go develop some kind of a septic system, or some kind of a system that would collect waste and rainwater and solar energy, and you could probably live off the grid pretty easily. You and 10 or 20 of your friends could easily do that. You've been on an airplane. These cities are small.
Right.
These cities are very small. It takes hours and hours to drive over vacant land until you get to a city. We really don't need this infrastructure. We really don't need the sewer systems. We really don't need the city water. We really don't need the General Electric companies. We don't need them. They know that. And so a lot of the people that are running the big companies, they know that they need us.
Yeah.
And they're afraid that we'll learn that we don't need them. So even though we don't have a lot of pushback yet for the tiny house movement or the micro community movement or the accessory dwelling movement, because those are three separate movements, we need to clear that up. Those are three separate movements. Even though we're all trying to get to the same ocean, there's three separate movements. And it's a shame that they have to.
We all need one another in our world today. One of my favorite sayings that I've been saying just in business in general over the last 6 years is that I want to connect and engage and collaborate and innovate and leverage our unique collective talents globally to form synergistic partnerships. That applies as much in this movement, so to speak, as it does to anything in my life every day. Because I need you and you need me, and we all need one another. We've tried that where we don't need you. And guess what? It's not getting us anywhere. As we end up here, this is a live hangout that we're doing in the moment, but as soon as it ends, within 5 minutes, this will be what we call an evergreen video, YouTube video, okay? And it'll be there for anybody to see. So let me end up with this. Tell me, as we end, what is your personal story connection to this? Because we've talked all around how important it is, but why are you personally involved?
I grew up in Detroit, and I grew up in a union town where my grandfather raised us, well, my grandfather, my father, my mother. Of course, we were raised by a big family, a big family of Southerners. That they all moved up there for a better life. And what I found through the 80s was that unions were being trampled over. The family unit, the fabric of America really, was being diminished by corporate greed. I was a young Republican, so it didn't matter to me. I thought, well, capitalism is the most important thing. So in order to be strong and American, we need to make those sacrifices. And then the 90s came, and the 90s were very selfish. And then the thousands came. And then the Occupy movement came. And we took over a park in Portland, two parks actually, Chapman and Lonsdale Squares. And we were there to say, hey, the housing bubble just burst. We have tons of people that have lost everything.
Yeah.
Who's running the show? And then we started looking at different organizations, and we started looking at different politicians and corporations, and we just decided that the banksters are killing us, and they're getting away with it, and we have to strike back. And so we struck back as a movement through the Occupy. And we took parks throughout the country, thousands of parks. What I found as doing peace and safety through those several weeks that I was there is that the police were sending the homeless people to our protest. And I know a lot of people are skeptical about that, but I spoke with over 100 people that came from under bridges and vacant homes, and they were threatened by the police departments that, hey, there's where you go. I believe, I have no doubt, that the mayors met in Atlanta, Georgia during the Occupy movement, and they decided that that's what they're going to do. And I know it for many different reasons. But to get back to where I started from, that's where micro-community concepts started from. It started from the Occupy movement. The bubble burst for us. We were presented with all sorts of political issues, even though it started out as political and corporate greed. It turned into just this astronomical, unable to wrap your head around conspiracy. So for me personally, the homeless issue started there, where the mayors and the police departments and their subsidiaries exploited the homeless to ruin our movement. And so in the beginning it was about, I was angry, and I wanted to make a point, like, you know, they're the homeless are the other 1%. The 1% over on this end ended up exploiting the homeless on this end to screw us, to stop them from doing what they're. So it was very personal, and honestly, it was more out of spite in the beginning. But then once I got to know the people that I was supposedly representing, I'm talking about years ago, 3 years ago, then it didn't take me long to realize that, you know what, these are everyday people. It could be me, it could be my mom, it could be anybody. Right. And somebody doesn't get up and do something now, then they'll just continue to do what they do. And so that's basically how I got into it.
So Michael, let's give your website before we end up here so that people will know how to find out more about what you're doing. I think it's fantastic. I want to keep in touch. I think we're going to be having some more conversations, you and I anyway, with some ideas that I've got. But I'm so grateful that you agreed, because I think you told me that you've done 100 interviews over the last 4 months. So I just want to say, Michael, thank you for taking your time. That's a lot of interviews to
Tommy, thank you.
You're welcome. So what is your website here?
It's just Micro Community Concepts. I mean, if you can remember Micro Community Concepts, it'll take you to our website or Facebook page, all the different news articles, and so just remember Micro Community Concepts.
But microcommunityconcepts.com, is that correct?
Well, it's .org or .com. I think we might even have .net now. Okay. We're careful about Micro Community Concepts, but I would just Google it, because that way you can read the different articles from Washington Post or wherever, and get a bunch of different people's input by Google, by searching it on whatever site. You can get all the different ideas and all the different perspectives of Micro Community Concepts. Of course, if you Google up Micro Community Concepts, the first thing that comes up is our website. Yeah. So.
Sounds great. Well, listen, I appreciate your time, and so for those who want to see this, you can go to tinyhomesrevolution.com. That actually takes you to our Facebook page, where you can like it and get to enter in and see this hangout, and then go to the Facebook and begin engaging with us there, because, you know, that's what it's all about, is enough people coming together who care about making a difference, who believe that this is a worthwhile endeavor with micro communities, tiny homes, however it works for you. Just go out there and make a difference. That's what I'm encouraging people to do, and let's pull together. So thank you again, Michael, for your time, and I look forward to talking with you again in the future.
Thanks, Dottie.
Okay, bye for now, everybody.